It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, my guest is Jean-Christophe Bédos, President and Chief Executive Officer of Maison Birks, a leading manufacturer and retailer of luxury jewelry and watchmaking since 1879, based in Montreal. Jean-Christophe was formerly with a high-end jeweler, Boucheron International, based in Paris, where he served as global president and CEO after a distinguished career with the Richemont Group in Paris and London, including president and managing director of Cartier's for France. He is a skilled brand builder in the luxury retail sector. He earned a Master of Science in Business Management from London Business School and 3 bachelor degrees, respectively, from the University of Paris-Sorbonne, Trent University in the UK, and Toulouse Business School. Born in Morocco, he lived in France and England until 2011 and now resides in Montreal with his wife and 4 children. Jean-Christophe Bédos, welcome into the corner office.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Brad.
Great to have you here. And we spoke a week or so ago, and, I'm kind of checking in with all of our guests and how things are going in the pandemic times. It's, of course, stretching a little longer than we all had hoped. But how have you been? How's your family? And, of course, how's your organization been holding up through these luckily, somewhat challenging times?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope you're fine. Luckily,
yes,
I have been fine. I've been following the strict protocols imposed in Canada,
right.
And it seems to work.
Yeah, it's amazing how those things work, right? And your family and the organization?
Family is good. The house looks like a boarding school because everyone works from home.
How many children do you have at home with you now?
We have 4 children. We're very fortunate. But it's
and
a
they're
busy
all out
household.
of school. They're all working, all doing schooling remotely, I presume.
Yeah, studying and going to school from home.
Well, we've learned a lot about togetherness over this last year, haven't we? Well, let's hear a little bit about you, your early life. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and, what your original early family life was like.
Well, my family originates from the southwest of France. I was born coincidentally in Morocco, North Africa, where my parents were posted.
Foreign service, or was your dad
my
in
father
business?
was actually a judge working for the French government.
Wow.
And he spent a number of years helping the Moroccan judicial system.
Well, Morocco was a former colony of France, was it not? Or was it protectorate?
Not colony as such, but he was a protectorate. So the king of Morocco was always on the throne, and France was cooperating, collaborating. And my father was, part of those French expats.
And how many years did your family live in Morocco?
10 years.
Wow. So you were born there, and was that kind of the first 10 years you were alive or so?
No, unfortunately, I was born last. We were 3 boys. I say unfortunately because Morocco is an absolutely fabulous country.
Yes.
Very rich culture, wonderful people, wonderful food also.
Yes. Right.
And I was born there, and we left Morocco when I was 2 years old.
Okay, so not a lot of memories from that
memories,
time.
unfortunately.
Yeah. Have you gone back though and visited there? And
yeah, we have. Yeah. We have no family there, but
right, of course.
There is a very strong emotional bond with Morocco within my family.
I can imagine. And so when you moved back, where did you then grow up in France?
I grew up in Toulouse, southwest of France, not far from Spain, right bang between the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea.
Beautiful there.
And very beautiful country. And it's a home capital of two things. For aerospace industry, Airbus is located there. Yeah. And rugby.
Rugby.
So you can't avoid any of those two.
I love it. Were you a rugby player growing up too? Was
I grew
that one
up
of your sports?
Playing rugby. Somehow, if you want to avoid it, you can't escape.
And did your dad continue as a judge in Toulouse? Was that part of?
Correct.
So he continued in the
judiciary. His whole career there.
Yeah. And mother, did she work from the home with
My
4
mother
kids?
Was,
I would imagine.
In Morocco, she actually was a teacher, and then
cool.
Then when we moved to France, she became an entrepreneur. She re-educated herself in cosmetics and beauty, and she opened a very strong, very big spa,
nice.
a little spa that became a very big spa beauty center in Toulouse. And so she was the entrepreneur of the family.
Nice, great. And then did your secondary, high school, the entire time in Toulouse, or did Dad have other assignments that you moved around with him with?
Well, my father had other assignments, but the family stayed in Toulouse, based in Toulouse.
Yeah. Nice.
So we all 3 brothers grew up there, studied there.
Were you a good student?
I was. I was not a teacher's pet, but I enjoyed, I have to say, I enjoyed studying. I enjoyed learning more than studying, in fact. And I was a little bit of a hyperactive kid, so I had to do many things.
What were your favorite subjects in school? What did you excel at?
I loved history. I loved math and languages. I learned English. I learned Spanish, German, and those influenced my youth very much.
Yeah, can imagine. And rugby as well, of course. That had some influence.
Rugby, rowing. There's a beautiful river in Toulouse. I did a lot of rowing. I did singing also. I went to operatic singing classes. I did a lot of painting and drawing as well. As I said, I was my mother, wanted to keep me busy, and for sure I was busy.
Right, I can imagine. And she had 3 other sons for which she had great experience bringing up, right?
So she kind of had 2 other sons.
2 others. Oh, okay, got it. So she had it down by the time you were growing up, right? She had the program in place.
Yeah, she admitted at some point that she was very privileged to have 3 sons, and she probably couldn't have put up with a daughter.
Got it. I love it. Well, growing up in North America, of course, a lot of kids have paper routes and do a lot of entrepreneurial things. But I know in Europe, it's a little bit different. I lived there for about 10 years, in my later youth. But were there things that you got involved with? Were there entrepreneurial activities or jobs that you had? Or were you primarily focused on your education and sports during those early years?
Sports, education, arts. This is what we did a lot in my family. A lot of music, as I said, and singing. Not so much young entrepreneur, pocket money things. However, my parents were quite strict. So when we reached the age of 14, which is the legal time when you are allowed to start working for a job, we all 3 sons had to spend 1 month in summer every year working in a factory.
Very good.
Factory workers to make enough money to pay for our holiday. This is that was one of the principles that my parents wanted to enforce.
Nice.
These were very, educational years.
Of course.
Months, I should say. For 3 years in a row, I worked in a coffee factory.
Oh my gosh! Wow. The same one all 3 years.
All 3 years.
Being
essentially blue collar worker
on the line,
very high temperature because, of course, so they were roasting
coffee bean roasting.
Coffee,
yeah,
absolutely.
Right, sure.
And so in the summer is hot in the south of France.
Oh yes,
plus the factory heat. I've learned to be resilient and not complain because I'm sure you understand when you come from a good family with good education and you're perceived as being privileged by every other workers so you make sure you don't fail. You make sure you play the course.
What were some of the lessons you took away from those 3 summers?
Frankly, I've learned a lot from interacting with a social class. I was not.
Yeah. You probably never had that up to that age.
Yeah,
right?
I was not meeting at school, and it still helps me today because in the jewelry industry and the retail industry, you don't only have high qualified, super highly educated people. You have people from all over origins, all kinds of origins, and those years were very important for me.
You developed some empathy, it sounds like, right?
Empathy, but also respect.
And respect,
how to be respected and how to respect others.
You
are exposed to diversity and inclusion, and it's not about being the wealthiest kid. It's not about being the best educated. It's about being respected for who you are rather than what you are.
Now, you went on to university. Now, was that expected of all 3 sons in the family? Dad, of course, had an education. Did mother go to university as well? Or?
Yes, my parents went to university.
Right.
It was not even questioned. I mean, this was the course,
it was assumed. Right.
You go to university. There was no hesitation or no debate. That was what we did. And
you went to Paris, right? Originally.
Well, at the beginning, I started in Toulouse.
Oh, in Toulouse. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what I really wanted to do. So by default, I knew that my father was a lawyer. My eldest brother chose law as well.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
So by default, I would go to law, and I knew that I would enjoy the intellectual challenges of a legal education.
Right.
But my mother was an entrepreneur, so I hesitated between the two, business and law.
Yeah. Right.
And I hesitated so much that I did both at the same time.
You studied business law, right? It made sense.
I did law and I did business. So I went to law school and to business school. And I did the 2 majors at the same time.
Well, you ultimately went to London Business School, of course, one of the best in Europe. But Nottingham Trent University, now was that part of your undergraduate?
It was part of, yes. Thanks to you have in Europe you have a lot of exchange programs between Europe and European countries. So with the Toulouse Business School, where I was a student, I took advantage of international exchange with the UK. And I went to Trent University in Nottingham, where I completed a Bachelor of Arts in business.
Now, I mentioned in the overview that you've been in the luxury goods business it almost forever, almost your entire career, and of course went to Cartier. It looks like pretty much right out of school. Tell us a little bit about your thinking around pursuing that industry per se.
Yeah, I was very lucky. Coincidentally, after my year in Nottingham, I finished my business courses, in fact, the French one and the English one.
Right.
And I had 1 more year to go to complete my law degree. So that's when I moved to Paris. I went to La Sorbonne in Paris. Last year of law school. And during that year, in order to pay for my accommodation, I looked for a part-time job.
Right.
And I found a part-time job at Cartier. So it was the international head office of Cartier. where they needed someone to do some statistics for them. Every morning I would do that, compiling.
Or were they building
sales.
a database then, or what was the statistical analysis? Something that was reported up to management, or?
Yeah, it was about compiling sales, margin, and inventory from every subsidiaries worldwide, in order to try to make sense of. It was essentially like a merchandising and planning division in the watch department of Cartier, where I was going every morning. I did that for almost a year. I completed my law degree, and immediately Cartier offered me a job.
And did they put you right into management? Did they have kind of a training program? I know you spent, like 12 years or so, and you left and came back, and we'll get to that in a moment. But how did they kind of start you out? What was the training and the development in those early days at Cartier?
Yes, that's the first job they offered me was at the international head office, and I stayed in the watch division at Cartier, and the job I had was a product development job. So product manager. And I was given responsibility quite early, not management responsibility, but product management.
And that was what for new products development, or was existing new lines? Yeah, new products. Oh, cool.
Range management, collection management, and new product for Cartier watches. That was absolutely fascinating for me. That was something like I had never been exposed to before. Right. My family was not family typically consuming consumer luxury goods.
Right, sure.
And so I was very impressed by the aesthetics and the quality of the product. That's what kept me going.
Yeah. So you got kind of the early taste of the luxury goods, and it stuck with you.
It did because it's a very versatile, multifaceted industry where you see the beauty of things, the high quality, the devotion, complete dedication of the people. And it's almost like working in some of those brands is like a mission. And emotionally and intellectually, it's always very stimulating to work for those brands.
Very high attention to detail and quality.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
It's not just about numbers.
Do you remember the first time you started managing people? Was that at Cartier?
Professionally, yes. And that's a good question in terms of leadership. Do you have to be employed to manage people? In the before that, when I was a teenager, I was offered the opportunity to be a captain of the rugby team.
Right.
Or I was a class representative at school. And I was exposed to, somehow a form of management. At Cartier, after 4 years, I got promoted to marketing and merchandising director in the UK for Cartier London. This is when I started actually to have people having a team reporting to me and managing them. Yeah.
Was the leadership style different there because of the quality of the products? Did that play out in a different way, or is it fairly much the same as it relates to kind of some of the leadership principles that you employed there?
I think Cartier had a very strong culture based and influenced by the charisma of the leaders.
Of course,
at the time. Yeah. Extremely charismatic, very inspiring people. And they were like leading the pack. It was almost a gang. I'm talking about 30 years ago. So we felt we were there conquering the world, having fun, working very hard. And we were not really questioning the next step in terms of career, or really asking management questions. There were clear leaders They were super inspiring people.
Yeah.
And all the employees, and especially my generation of young managers and directors, we were simply like disciples.
Was there mentoring that went on? Was there active mentoring that went on? In other words, are people more senior in the organization that you would go to, and that would be kind of cultivating your career, or was it kind of left more to the individual to seek those people out?
It was very much left to the individuals. The culture was very entrepreneurial. It was based on camaraderie. It was most certainly not as formal and structured as it is today. And I felt the values were, for me, within Cartier, very close to what I had experienced in rugby. Play hard, work hard, and you're all together as a gang, and you have fun, and you learn, and you learn as you go.
What were some of the earliest leadership lessons that you took away from those periods, 30 odd years ago, as you mentioned?
It's a good question, Brant. What I remember from that time is very much the passion. The moves were not calculated. They were all driven by a sense of commitment, engagement, very strong emotional bond with colleagues and with your boss, whom you admired, and just going for it. There was no limit. Those were very passionate years.
Yeah, fantastic. So you left. You went to Richemont for a couple of years and then came back. So tell us a little bit about that.
Cartier belongs to Richemont. So Richemont is a group, a holding company that owns Cartier. But I left. I left after 10 years, I think. And I left to go to London Business School.
Okay, right.
And the reason I left was it was exactly 1999 at the time.
Turn of the century.
That's true. We were going through the first internet bubble, and internet was already in its first revolution. E-commerce was going through its first revolution, and I felt I was in my mid-30s. Mid-30s, and I felt like, oh my God, this is happening. It's an incredible revolution. Right. It's going to change the world. And at the time, the luxury goods industry was extremely skeptical. A lot of brands, especially the watch and jewelry brands, were saying, this is not for us.
Yeah, right.
This is too mass market, no control of quality, not enough control of payments, and protection for the customer, protection for the products. And I felt like, oh my God, am I missing an opportunity here?
Right. Particularly just coming out of business school, right? Because you were exposed to all those things and had the opportunity to learn, case studies and other types of things that was going on at that time.
Yeah, very exciting time. I had been working for 10 years.
Right, sure.
Law school and business school were far behind. Right. So I said to myself, maybe it's time for me to do an MBA. Repackage myself, relearn, rediscover. And so that's what I did. I found London Business School, and I chose London Business School because at the time, the London Business School had just received a massive grant, more than 200 million pounds.
Wow.
To create the foundation of entrepreneurial management. And so that inspired me, and I left to join London Business School because those were a very exciting time for the school. And
you did that full time, right?
I did that full time.
Took time off, right?
Self-financed.
Yeah.
I borrowed money. I had wife and kid, and off we went.
Yeah. Wow.
Back to being a student. And I loved it. I loved it so much. I really developed with school friends.
Was it a 1-year program, a 2-year program? 1 year.
The program is a kind of it's an MSc actually, but it's an MBA it's a 1-year MBA called the Sloan Fellowship Program.
That's right. Yeah.
So part of the students were company sponsored, and the other part were self-sponsored. I was self-sponsored, and I felt I was buying a year of my life and repackaging myself. It was fabulous.
Yeah. But then you came back to Richemont and evolved Cartier. So good. Tell us a little bit about that. How did that come about?
Why leave if you go back? If you come back,
that's right.
The thing is, and that was the irony of the story, because at the end of that year, we were almost 1 week before the end of the program, I received a call from the CEO of Richemont. And as I said earlier, Richemont is a holding company.
That's the holding company.
They probably have about 20 luxury brands, Cartier being one of them. The CEO of Richemont calls me and said, look, you've left, you went to business school, I like what you did, I think you have guts, I need a right-hand man, would you join me?
And this was the CEO of Richemont, this is the CEO of the holding company. Wow.
And so I felt like, oh my God, why
can I say no to this?
Why do I have to be submitted to this dilemma, to this question? I had business plans with friends, financed by
the internet was exploding, right? Everyone was excited about that.
Exactly. Venture capitalists from the city of London giving you money to create whatever you want. And we had 3 business plans, cooking nicely, and then I went to see the dean of the London Business School and said, "Look, I don't know what I should do.
I have this dilemma.
I was not expecting this." And the dean
what did he or she say?
He said, "I have one question for you. I'm not going to give you an answer, but you should ask yourself, of all the people, business plans, venture capitalists." E-com guys and the Richemont guy, of all these people you are currently interacting with, who would you really jump out of this window for? And he showed me the window. It was on the 3rd floor. So and I said, okay, thank you. I don't need any more of your time. I think I have my answer. So I called back the CEO of Richemont, because he was the most inspiring man I had ever met before. So that's what I did.
And had you worked with him or knew of him?
No, I knew of him because
you knew of him, right?
Because he was actually the ex CEO of Cartier.
Okay, got it. His reputation preceded him, as we say, right?
Somehow, yes, and somehow. He didn't know me when I was at Cartier. I was too young, not senior enough, and I knew him obviously, but never worked with him. But I knew how strong he was and charismatic. Wow. So I was privileged to be with him every day for 2 years, and I learned so much from a wonderful man and very strong businessman.
Well, that obviously solidified your career in the luxury goods business, right? There was no going back after that.
You bet, yeah.
But you did go back to Cartier, right? You became the president and managing director. Now, was that for the global business that you then headed up?
After 2 years with Mr. Perrin, that was his name, he actually told me, I have a great job for you. You're going to be the leader of Cartier in France.
Wow.
And you will be actually leading the entire Richemont organization for the French market. So I was managing director of Cartier France, and at the same time,
the crown jewel.
Yeah,
right?
And managing director of Richemont for Richemont operations, back office functions, support functions. So that was fabulous. I mean, after a year at London Business School, over 2 years later, to be offered that kind of job is like a golden gift,
The crown jewel. Crown jewel.
Yeah.
But you went on to Boucheron. Now, is that part of a Richemont Group, or
Nope.
was that a separate? Okay, all right. So tell us about that transition. What kind of inspired you after just a couple of years in that role to take your first CEO job?
Yeah, that was another big dilemma. And I actually I had to go and ask Mr. Perrin for permission to leave Richemont.
That was a difficult conversation.
It was because of course I was almost I started my career there after 16 years.
He was probably in his 70s, right? 60s or 70s at the time, or?
Frankly, Brad, it felt for me that I was born in that family,
Yes.
And I was there going to
your grandfather, right? Right? And telling him you're leaving the family or something like that,
and
right?
I felt that. I felt somehow I had to go through this process of cutting the umbilical cord. And
so difficult.
When Boucheron approached me, actually, that was a role for a global CEO.
Was it by a recruiter, or did they come to you directly?
Yeah, recruiter.
Right. You were on the radar screen by then. Probably had been for some time.
Search firm, and the classic, process of headhunting.
Of course. I know a little bit about that, yeah.
Exactly. You do. And so they chose me. That was a very long process.
Sure.
On and off, because for 6 months I didn't hear from them, and then I came back, and eventually it took quite some time for them to choose a CEO. So I was offered the position, and again at that time I was 39. I was not yet 40, and I felt, wow, God, here you are. You are not even 40. You're given the opportunity to lead a company globally. Is that going to happen again? Not sure. And that was, of course, Boucheron was a much smaller business than Cartier, very small business, in fact, but another crown jewel in the family or in the club of high jewelry luxury companies. Boucheron is one of those top notch. So I left.
Yeah. Wow.
After
tough
asking
one.
For
How was that
permission
conversation? How was the conversation with your mentor, with the director of?
So, oh God, Brad, you ask the questions.
Give me the highlights. Just give us the highlights.
No, he said, look, that was a funny one. He said, I know. I said, what do you mean, you know? Well, the shareholder of
it's a small industry.
Of Boucheron called me for a reference.
Yeah,
I said, oh, God, there you go. Small world. And I said, what did you tell him? And these were his words. I said, go for Jean-Christophe. He is crystal. What do you mean crystal? Well, that's how I feel about you. You're transparent and you're pure. Go for it. Go. And if I were in your shoes, I would go. I said, okay.
Let you go. Wow.
Thank you,
That's
boss.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, you obviously had a terrific relationship with him.
I did.
You spent 7 years there, and it was a part of a global business. First CEO job, I'm sure, as a 40-year-old, barely. A big organization, probably lots of folks older than you, and your direct reporting, et cetera. What were some of the key challenges you had during those 7 years?
This is that's a time when you are truly confronted with the question of leadership. Where does your authority come from? That was the question. Right. Not just being the boss and having a title, on the label on the door of your office. It's not enough. Not from expertise, because of course I had the people who were very much older, as you said, than me, but strong experts in high jewelry, in stones, and in international commerce, in dealing with the very wealthy clientele. So that was an interesting challenge for me, and it's all again. as I mentioned earlier, it's all about.
And of course, you're the young buck CEO coming from the big successful firm, right? And oh my, I can imagine the daggers that might have been out in the hallways.
or simply gaining your authority from respect from
and how did you
others,
do that?
having some legitimacy, legitimacy from.
How did you go about doing that? I mean, the crystal. I mean, I can hear that. Obviously, you've talked about yourself in the terms that I believe, your mentor there, of course, at Richemont knew. But you come into a new organization, you don't know anyone. Maybe there's a couple of former Cartier employees,
yes,
right?
You're correct. Yes.
How do you go about establishing that? How did you do that? Because you were there for a good long time, a good 7 years.
The point for me was, first of all, to gain legitimacy, and therefore I decided to be authentic and not play a game, not pretend I knew everything and I had an answer for every question.
Right.
That was important for me. But also I went through a very strong immersion into the history and heritage of Boucheron. I learned a lot. I studied a lot because just in terms of style and design language, Boucheron is a very different company from Cartier. And I didn't want to feel that I was coming with recipes.
Right.
I wanted to come with experience, obviously.
Yeah.
And the authority had to come from the capacity to listen and learn from the Boucheron culture. So I traveled a lot over the world.
Met the people.
To meet everyone from Boucheron.
Clients,
a lot of presence in Asia, France. I also spent a week in the workshop, and I asked the workshop manager to take me as an apprentice for a week. So they laughed, obviously. And I was.
But you were serious.
And I made myself very ridiculous because, to train a jeweler of the level of jewelers employed in a workshop of Place Vendôme, whether it's Cartier or Boucheron.
They've been doing this since they were teenagers.
Yeah.
Right?
They start when they are teenagers.
30, 40, 50 years.
And they get trained for somewhere between 10 and 15 years before they become qualified jewelers.
Right.
And I asked to sit on the bench for a week.
Wow.
And this is when, going back to my teenage years, when my parents were sending me to the coffee factory.
Right, working in the summers. Yeah.
This is where that was helpful because
you zip it closed. You look with your eyes, right? You ask questions. And
you ask questions. You do things, and for example, they give you a little seesaw, a hand seesaw, to cut metal, to cut gold. Gold comes in a very slim bar, and you have to cut a straight line. There is nothing harder in your entire life than cutting a straight line in a golden bar.
Oh my gosh.
Brant, that was, I did sweat blood to go through this.
And I'm sure, learned a few things, but also gained a lot of respect and a lot of insights, right, into the core of the business.
I did, because within that week, I made friends, and I couldn't stop from going back to the workshop to check what they were doing, whether things, for 7 years, whenever I had spare time, I was going there. Because this is where everything, takes, the origin of every product in this industry is in the workshop.
Just celebrated 9 years with Maison Birks. You made the move to Canada, right? Another big geographic change.
Yeah.
Tell us how that came about, and kind of again, you've been your whole career in France. You obviously spent some time in London. You went to school. You worked there a couple of years, but big change, big continental shift. So tell us a little bit about the decision making that went into that.
Yeah, I was ready. I was ready for a challenge. I really was, and quite frankly, you can play once you are in this industry, especially in Europe, you can play safe. You can stay in your comfort zone, and you can keep collecting medals, going from one company to another, one brand to another, And I didn't feel like it was for me. And my wife and I, were feeling by after the financial crisis, 2008, we were in 2010 when we were saying, okay, should we stay in Europe? Is this the future for our children? As I said, we have 4 children.
Were the kids still in school then? They're
still small, very small.
Yeah,
somewhere
small. So,
last, we have twin boys. Were 4 years old.
Oh my gosh! Yeah. Very
and the eldest was just 13. So we're thinking about different opportunities, and should we go to Asia? Should we go to North America or anywhere else? And this opportunity came
through a headhunter as well,
from a search firm.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
And I was ready to look into it because I felt why not? This is a big change, cultural change, business change, everything new. But
had you traveled? You had traveled to Canada before, I'm sure, in your travels. Had you ever lived in Montreal or spent any time in Quebec?
I had been to Montreal once before.
Wow.
But the idea of it was a family decision, and really a decision not so much for me, but for our kids. My wife and I felt Canada is a very inclusive country, very welcoming. Great reputation worldwide, fabulous for education, and socially.
Yes, very nice people.
A very nice place. So we
welcoming culture.
Absolutely integrative and welcoming, and we felt let's try this.
All right.
Let's go for it.
And is Maison Birks, was it about the same size as Boucheron, also smaller?
Yeah, actually, you're right. This very comparable in terms of size. Not as, of course, as internationally spread.
Yes.
But in terms of volume of business, very comparable.
Originally founded in Canada, right? And from Montreal originally. Isn't that their
founded in Montreal
roots?
by Henry Birks in 1879, as you mentioned.
Right.
An Englishman in Canada, like a pioneer. It's one of the. Can you believe it's one of the oldest companies in Canada?
How have you found your leadership style change? Over this last decade, particularly with the continental shift, moving to more North American, and working in a similar size company, but obviously different culture.
Very, very different. And I was not prepared for such a cultural difference, in fact, in terms of management culture. So it's not so much about what I was referring to earlier, the charisma, the authenticity,
passion.
It's very much about being accepted. But North America has a tradition of collaboration, which is stronger than Europe. The sense of sharing and listening, being heard, checking that what you say is accepted is stronger here in North America. And what I mean by that is that in Europe, if you are the leader, people complain because that's what Europe does. But they act, they do. In North America, there is much more sensitivity to the decisions. It's not so much that people criticize decisions, but they have to accept the decisions.
More collaborative.
And from a collaborative point of view, but also from their own cultural and emotions viewpoint. Diversity is important in North America, and every sensitivity, every cultural differences have to be, or gender, or religious, or ethnical background have to be taken into consideration.
Right.
It's not so strong in Europe.
let's talk a little bit about culture. You mentioned the differences between Europe and obviously North America, but the Maison Birks culture, again, 1879, has been around going into its third century. You're coming in, obviously, after many, many CEOs before you, but yet the CEO does set the culture and the tone. What would you say is kind of most unusual or perhaps unique about Maison Birks culture?
The previous CEO had been in place for 12 years, which is long for a CEO.
Yeah.
I've been now here for 9 years, so it's not.
Which is also long.
It's not bad, but
don't worry, I'm not looking to take you away.
But it's all about enjoying the time and building over time. It's long time driven, and I like that. I like this making your footprint perceived as being there for good and long, and not just like a little bee going from one flower to another.
Up the ladder and on to the next thing. Yeah, right.
So the culture at Boucheron was Birks was very traditional, kind of old school. It is in Quebec, which is as you know, a French-speaking province.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It was perceived as a Anglo company.
Interesting. Yeah. Right.
The old boys, old Anglo families,
founded by an Englishman. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm.
So it felt like the prince had to kiss the bride. To make her feel younger.
Interesting.
I had a feeling I had to refresh a lot of things in order to adapt to the new world. That was my impression. A lot of people had been there, many, many years.
Right.
It's great from that point of view, but the loyalty to the company is fabulous. But I could sense there was resistance to change.
Right.
That I had to respect. Obviously, I didn't want to shake everything, but little by little, touch by touch, I had to adapt the company to the 21st century.
Freshen things up a bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you look for when you're making bets on the people you invest in and hire, Jean-Christophe?
The number one item is trust for me. It's quite sensitive, actually. I'm not a micromanager. I'm not a helicopter manager trying to control. I'm not a control freak. I'm rather a team player. And I have to trust that the people are doing their part and not playing games. One aspect, actually, of the North American culture and Canadian culture from that point of view, and I'm lucky with Birks, there is way less politics here in Canada at Birks than there was at my previous companies.
Interesting.
The companies I worked for belonged to very big, large groups, big holding companies.
Right.
And the politics are quite
thick,
an important aspect of life within a big group.
Sure.
Birks is a standalone company; it doesn't belong to a group. So we are, doers. We have our destiny in our hands, and I like that. It's a very true relationship, very authentic.
Well, Jean-Christophe, you've been very, very generous with your time. I appreciate it. But we always have one last question before we let you go. And that's what kind of career and life advice would you give someone that perhaps is, mid-career, maybe you 10, 15 years ago before your first CEO assignment. And, maybe they have their eyes on the corner office. What would you advise them to do?
Well, thank you for your comments, Brandt. It's important. If someone aspires to become a CEO, especially in today's world, the new generation, let's talk about Generation Z, these guys were born with technology.
That's right.
And as much as they understand all about technology, which, generations like ours, Brad, we learned it, but we were not born in it.
That's right. That's right.
I would invite them to not consider this as enough. It's great, but it's not enough.
Right.
And I would tell a young person, a young girl, a young boy, you have to travel. Expose yourself to other cultures. Learn to accept and be accepted. Learn to be tolerant. You don't learn to be tolerant online. You learn to be tolerant by confronting yourself with people who don't speak your language, don't have your religion, don't have the same culture as yours. It doesn't mean that they are above or below you. They are like you. And you have to really learn languages and travel.
Yeah.
Follow your instinct, of course. Don't do what people tell you to do. And do what you love. You are only very good at what you love. Yeah. Don't force yourself. Just go for what drives you in life, what gives you pleasure.
Jean-Christophe Bédos, the chairman, president, and CEO of Maison Birks, thank you so very much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
Well, thank you so very much, Brant, for giving me the opportunity to talk to you. It's a real pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Handley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.